Cricket is my passion and I cannot avoid it.
Australia won their 6th ICC title, but their first T20 title in probably the 7th edition. They created history when they beat New Zealand convincingly by 8 wickets at the Ring of Fire, the Dubai Cricket Stadium. And to discuss about how Australia came back in this tournament, I have the great Watto, who has been part of the 2015 World Cup winning squad, the 2007 World Cup squad, and many more Australian victories. Hello and welcome to the show, Watto.
It's great to be here in person. Thanks for having me.
Oh yes, Watto. You know, we've done many shows on Zoom, and to have you in person, I still feel that there's some goosebumps.
Oh, you're very kind. We've had a lot of fun throughout this T20 World Cup chatting. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh yes, and I remember when we did the preview, we had picked up probably India and England as the favourites. But how T20 tournament has turned around.
I know, it's incredible how it's panned out. And like I think about India and how things just didn't work out for them. And like it did in the 2019 World Cup, in that semi-final against New Zealand, just conditions just didn't work for them. And the toss in this T20 World Cup, the toss against Pakistan, those wickets for those first few games in Dubai were a bit moist. So unfortunately, the teams that batted first in Dubai for the first part of that tournament really did struggle. So it's the crazy thing about cricket in general, not just T20 cricket, but sometimes it is the luck of the draw, whether you get the right conditions to suit you, whether you win the toss or lose the toss. Just something so simple can have such a big impact. But as the tournament has gone through, just to be able to see the ebbs and flows of teams that, you just thought, like I thought Pakistan were just going to, because they were so dominant. They were playing such incredible T20 cricket. And same with England. Until England had the one injury of Tamal Mills and then Jason Roy, up until that point, they looked like they're indestructible. No one was going to get close to them. But just one or two things can make such a difference. A toss here and there, whether you win or lose it. And then before you know it, the Australians get on a roll and find their way to winning the first title.
Very right, Watto. But you were part of the Australian cricket setup for so many years. How different is this team what it was in 2016?
It's not a lot different, to be totally honest. I think the thing that I was most nervous about with the Australian team going into this tournament, like it has been when I was playing in every tournament really I went into, with the Australian team was the team was never picked, and the players and the combinations never played together for a long period of time in the lead up to the tournament. And I remember playing India in the 2016 summer in the lead up to the 2016 World Cup that was in India. And India played the same team every game for the 3 games that we played and beat Australia very convincingly. And we had changes left, right and centre, different people batting in different spots, and it was ridiculous. And then we came up against India in the semi-final, in the quarter-final, and India was so dominant because they knew what their roles were and they were able to sort of gel together. So that was my concern for Australia going into this tournament. But the right people fight at the right times. After that game against England, where they got obliterated, you could see them just really free up. And the couple of question marks that were around the team, one was, well, not question marks, but the form was around Dave Warner, Aaron Finch. And Dave Warner, we saw him find his feet, and it started with the innings against West Indies. You could see that just a big shift in his batting, and he was at his peak from that moment on. And then Mitchell Marsh, he had a great winter when Steve Smith wasn't there, and he capitalised on that. And the way he came in and took on the game, and then it really came to fruition last night when he just came in and hit just took the game on from ball one. That was another missing link as well. And then from a bowling perspective, it was the way Zampa bowled was just, he was so close to getting player of the tournament. And the other one was Josh Hazlewood, and it was because of his IPL experience with CSK, because they gave him an opportunity even in his second leg of the IPL, because he was a bit rusty in the first couple of games, but as CSK do, they just go, we're picking you, we're going to stick with you, and we know you'll find your feet. And Australia was so rewarded with that because Josh Hazlewood had an incredible tournament, an incredible game last night, where Mitchell Starc went for 60 off 4 overs, and Josh Hazlewood got 3 key wickets for 16 runs off 4 overs. So just the things just came together so perfectly, whereas the previous times and previous World Cups, or T20 World Cups that I played, things didn't come together. There's always a little missing link here and there. 2010, we got as close as we could, and we made the final, but it just didn't really just glue together, whereas you could see things shift. And again, that West Indies game as a collective, you could see the glue just really getting nice and so strong, and then they were going to be super hard to beat.
Absolutely spot on, Watto. And you were in a group where there were probably all teams equally good. And that game, whereas you mentioned about Warner picking up his, form, especially against West Indies, and also against Bangladesh, where you all made sure that your net run rate was good. Otherwise, there would have been a clash between you and South Africa, and it eventually helped you all up your net run rate.
Yeah, and that's I suppose the big losses that Australia had and India had. When you get hammered in a tournament like this, then your net run rate goes down. It's so hard, and it's really, the net run rates don't become important until the last game or two. And then you're like, I wish we went harder, or if there was an opportunity to be able to really try and close out a game. And the Australians were fortunate enough that game against Bangladesh, they were able to bat second. They knew exactly what they needed to get. Dave Warner was still in that game, was swinging a bit too hard. Aaron Finch sort of got away. But from that moment on, when they were able to really get their run rate up and going, it also freed them up from a batting perspective in particular. So they could have the licence, and that's the way to play the fearless T20 cricket when everyone's at their best. So from that moment on, once they're able to get that run rate back up to being on par, so they knew that they were around about with South Africa in particular, with them playing such great cricket after that first game, then it was always going to be touch and go. And for Australia's sake, they were very fortunate, because how close was it? South Africa only ended up losing one game, the first game of the tournament, which was a close game in the end. And South Africa played great cricket, but who would have thought you'd lose one game and still not make it through to the next round? And that was just the quality of that group. Was you couldn't even drop a game, otherwise you wouldn't make it in the semis. But for Australia's sake, they got very fortunate. They were able to take down, had an opportunity. Bangladesh were sadly in that game, but across the board, they sadly were they just weren't good, which they've got a lot of talented cricketers as well. And they, for whatever reason, there's something going on there, and they just didn't turn up really at all. And Australia capitalised on that, and then they snuck into the semi. And when Pakistan were playing Australia, and seeing how they played against West Indies, I knew there was a really, really good chance that Australia could. They were the team that could beat Pakistan because of the history as well. Australia every time has sort of got over Pakistan in ICC events. So even though some of the players wouldn't have been in those games, growing up as a kid, you'd have those scars. And Australia just found a way to be able to get across the line.
Since you're talking about that Pakistan game, we all know 96 for 5 in 12.2 overs in the last recognised pair. And we hadn't seen much of Matthew Wade. So was Stoinis, who had still to show that he's a finisher. You were nervous, I guess, at that time?
Very, very nervous, because, I knew what Marcus Stoinis can do. He hadn't had a really big innings in the tournament up until that point. Played a couple of little nice, important cameos. But I'd known and I'd seen what he'd done in the IPL for Delhi at Dubai as well, the Dubai International Stadium. So when he was there, I was confident, but Matthew Wade, I wasn't as confident because I'd never seen him chase runs down. He's always been in the Big Bash when he's playing T20 cricket. He's been a top order batsman. So, and it's a difference, not skill from a hitting perspective, but a different skill mentally to be able to absorb pressure and just sum up the conditions, sum up the situation under pressure and having to score very quickly and just commit to it. And gosh, what Matthew Wade did was something incredible. To be able to bat the way he did, yes, he got lucky. Hassan Ali unfortunately dropped that catch, which you just feel really sorry for him because everyone in Pakistan cricket's going to remember that forever. But Matthew Wade got lucky, but still that one time. But the commitment that he showed to be able to try and take on one of the premier fast bowlers in the world was something very special. And from that moment on, if Australia got across the line there, because all of Australians would have been nervous. Even Matthew Wade would have been nervous because he hadn't showed that he was able to chase runs like that before. But then when he did that, I was like, I was going to be very surprised if New Zealand were able to knock over Australia last night.
And when New Zealand were put in and put 172, we saw Kane Williamson. It's Kane the train, they say, showed his masterclass.
Oh, Kane was, yeah, that was an incredible innings, and he hadn't had any form in the lead up to that game as well. Well, that's IPL and T20 internationals throughout 2021 as well. He hadn't scored many runs at all. But the skill of Kane, and I've seen it. I've played against him for Sunrisers when he gets into that mood, and it's like he can predict exactly what a bowler's going to bowl, and he gets into the wavelength of the bowler. And it's not like he's sitting there and only playing one shot, but he's got an understanding, a really good understanding where the bowler's going to bowl, and then just hits it wherever he wants. And that's exactly what he did last night. It was an incredible innings, a final to get 85 off 48 balls and just bat the way he did against world-class bowlers, world-class bowlers to take the game on when New Zealand was struggling there. After Martin Guptill got out, New Zealand were in a big hole. But obviously he made a conscious effort to target Mitchell Marsh to be able to, and that over of 11 really just got things going for him. And then he just continued he took on Glenn Maxwell. He knew that was an opportunity to be able to, he was going to be easy to take on compared to, well, Josh Hazlewood, Pat Cummins, Mitchell Starc, those guys. So, Kane Williamson, it was an absolute delight to watch. Someone at the peak of his powers, and no matter who bowled where, he's finding the boundary. And it just seemed risk-free. And that's when you see the best batsmen batting in T20 cricket in particular and scoring super fast. It's like they're not even taking a risk and they're scoring nearly 200 strike rate.
But do you feel they held back Nisham too late, where maybe they could have pushed ahead? Now, easy for me to ask, but Nisham got probably only 2 overs to bat when he had almost won the game in the last game against England.
Yeah, in a way, but Phillips came in and did a nice job he batted nicely against. Yeah, he did. He batted nicely against Zampa to be able to hit a couple of boundaries. But you're right, bringing in Nisham to be able to continue to take on the game, because you look at the scorecard, as really just a solo innings from Kane Williamson, which if he had a little bit of other support, so if someone else got 50 off 30 balls, they would have got 190. Because you saw Martin Guptill, who started off nicely in the first couple of overs, but then fell into a hole, got 20 out of 35 balls or something like that. So then no one else really got going, apart from Jimmy Neesham right at the end. Hit a couple of boundaries at the end, but it was too late. So if Kane Williamson had a little bit more support, then they would have got a total that was nearly unchaseable. But that was always my concern around New Zealand, is they don't have a lot of firepower. Whereas Australia had a lot more firepower and match winners from a batting perspective as a starting point, who could come in and, if they were on, they could win the game and take the game away from New Zealand. Whereas for me, New Zealand are mainly, Guptill, if he's on his day, and with my playing against Martin Guptill, he never really scored runs against Australia when I was playing against him. He has recently in recent times. But on his day, he certainly can. Martin Guptill can score quickly. Daryl Mitchell was excellent in the tournament, but he would go fairly slow and then speed up towards the end. There was no one really who could come in and just take the game on like Jimmy Neesham did. So Kane Williamson needed more support, and they would have got a total that nearly would have been out of reach for the Australians.
And at the break, 172, you felt it was a par score, or they were some 20 runs short?
No, I thought it was probably maybe just above par, because that wicket was definitely drier than the previous games that were there. It was definitely drier than the semi-final game that went through really nicely. You could see the ground just chopping up a little bit more. You could see the quick bowlers in particular, the ball didn't swing much, and then they went cross seam and their cutters gripped. The ball spun a little bit more as well. So you could see that it wasn't as true a wicket as what it had been previously in the previous few games. So I thought 172 was going to be a really hard chase. But then you sort of put into batting second. There was no dew last night, but maybe when the sun goes down, must slicken up the surface just a little bit, the batting surface, and the ball you would see once Dave Warner found his range, then he trusted that he could hit through the line of the ball. whether it's against quicks, against a spin. So it showed that it is actually a pretty nice surface. But yeah, when I 172, I thought it was going to be like an incredible chase to be able to chase him down, which it was. Which it was. Like for Dave Warner, Mitchell Marsh to be able to bat the way they did, that's an incredible chase to be able to chase that down in a final. And to be able to take the game on like they did. They were super brave. They had to be able to chase down that total. And they just kept going. Once they got into their zone, well, Mitch Marsh got into his zone from ball one, but Dave Warner, you'd see once he just felt his zone, and they just kept going and taking on the game. And it's incredible how when you have that mindset and you get into that space, it's amazing then how things start to fall your way as well. Yes, you can get unlucky, or well, not unlucky. It can not be your day, and your first miss hit goes straight to hand. But the miss hits started to fall short. The ones they got out of the middle sailed over the fence. And those are the days as a batsman as you dream of. You're lining them up, you've got total fearlessness in your mind, and then the ones you nail go for huge sixes, or you nail it and it pierces the gap, and your miss hits just drop short. and that's exactly what happened, and the Australians made the most of that last night.
But what was Bolt doing which Saudi and Adam Mills did not do? Were they bowling short, or how would you sum their bowling, fast bowling?
So, well, Bolt swung the ball more than Southey did with that brand new ball. He was swinging the ball pretty late. But the one thing with a Bolt, which he never really had before, he's really developed his defensive bowling skills. He's got an understanding now of how to read a batsman, what balls to bowl at the right time to be able to try and get out of a batter's hitting zone. Whereas Milne runs in and tries to bowl as fast as he can, and he bowls a cutter here and there. And because he's quite flat, he is very gettable, because he's not like someone who's tall who bowls fast. He's pretty skiddy. He's a bit more along the lines, a slightly faster version of Hassan Ali. So if they need to execute perfectly, otherwise they can get punished. Southey, he'd been really good for the whole tournament. He'd only gone, his economy rate for the whole tournament up until last night was 5.8, and he'd taken key wickets through the whole innings. But the Australians, Southey just wasn't able to get his defensive bowling in last night. Once the ball stopped swinging, then the Australians could line him up. But Trent Boult, to see his evolution as a bowler over the last even 18 months, in the last 2 IPLs, he's gone from being someone who's very good with a new ball, a wicket taker with a new ball, to now being able to get himself out of trouble and then defend the overs at the back end of an innings. So he's really turning into a really complete T20 bowler.
Now, we've spoken about David Warner, but I want to talk about this all-rounder Mitchell Marsh. You see, Australia gave him that number 3 spot and backed him. Do you think that was a very smart move? Well,
that was more out of just a lot of the main players pulling out of the West Indies and Bangladesh tour. If it wasn't for Steve Smith, Dave Warner, Glenn Maxwell, Marcus Stoinis, those guys not going to the West Indies and not going to Bangladesh, Mitchell Marsh wouldn't have had an opportunity to be able to bat at 3, to be able to show where he's at with his game. And Mitchell Marsh made that most of the opportunity, and that's the beauty of life in general, is the sliding doors moments and opportunities that you just don't know are around the corner, out of nowhere, and you go, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And right place, right time, Mitchell Marsh was ready to make the most of that opportunity. And if it wasn't for those guys not going on that tour, he would have got picked, and he would have got picked in the team possibly. He would have batted 6 and 7. He wouldn't have batted at 3. But he made the most of that. And then it was like, they were like, oh, do we bat Steve Smith at number 3? If he's going to play, he probably should bat at number 3, because he's better to play in the power play if he gets in, if Australia loses an early wicket. But then Mitch Marsh was flying high with confidence and batting incredibly well. And he's a very devastating batter, as we've seen over this T20 tournament. He's a very devastating batsman. He hits good balls with really nice cricket shots. He's not even just big slogs across the line. He plays proper cricket shots and hits the ball incredibly hard. So he saw an opportunity because there was a couple of doors open for him, and that's the beauty of life. And he made the right place, right time, right skills, top of his game, and he's nailed it.
So what to say is, if you get an opportunity, grab it with both hands, and that's what Mitchell Marsh did.
Yeah, and there's times where there's an opportunity that comes along, and for whatever reason, you're not at the top of your game to be able to capitalise on that opportunity. And it's the unfortunate thing, and that's in life in general. An opportunity might come up, but you just don't have the skill set right at that moment in time to be able to really capitalise on it. But then other times, things just open up, and you know you're primed, ready to be able to make the most of that. And Mitchell Marsh, he did, and now I think there's a really good chance that he could just go straight into the test team because he's flying high on confidence. And the other thing from an Australian public's point of view is he's always been the scapegoat of just about everything. If Australia's lost a game and he was playing, he's always been the scapegoat, which has always been unfair, but that's just how the public and the media have sort of contrived it to be. Whereas now, that's gone. Australia had not won a T20 World Cup. The elusive, and all the great players that played for Australia, the 2007 World Cup team, the 2010 World Cup team that we had was an incredible team, but wasn't able to get that trophy that Australia's been fortunate enough to win so many other trophies. But the T20 World Cup was the elusive one. And now for Mitchell Marsh to be the star of the show, they've got to get him in all formats. They've got to get him in all formats, give him the opportunity to be able to bat in the top order as well, because he's flying high and he's going to dominate for quite a while.
And we could see emotional moment, a lot of players into tears. You are into tears, winning that trophy, even though Australia is used to winning the 50 overs. They won it 5 times, but this was one thing which was missing. They dominated a test, and now winning this, emotions pouring.
Oh, absolutely. It was. I feel like very, very fortunate and lucky to have had the opportunity to be able to come over, and even not as a player, to be able to be here as a commentator and talk about the game, but also to experience the emotions of being around this tournament, because I know how much it meant to me when I was playing for Australian T20 cricket, and how much disappointment I had when we just couldn't get it right. And then to see it all come together, and it was something in Australian cricket that people in the end didn't talk about it much. It was like the elephant in the room, that it's there, but you're like, we're not going to talk about that because it's not our thing. Even though Australia's always had some of the best T20 players in the world, but it's like, let's not talk about that because we're not good at it. And that's what it was. After every T20 World Cup that went past, it got more and more sort of buried to a point where it just wasn't really talked about, until you could see the momentum shift during this tournament. And now these guys have stepped up, and now they've done something that a lot of the great players who played cricket for Australia weren't able to do. With Ricky Ponting, Matt Hayden, Adam Gilchrist, Brett Lee, these guys, Andrew Simons, weren't able to win a T20 World Cup, and these guys, and that's the reason why there's so much emotion for those guys the number of those guys have been through a decent chunk of that journey, but then also for me to be able to see and experience that, even, and having the privilege to be able to commentate in those last 5 overs as well, which the ICC and Star, who have given me this incredible opportunity and privilege to be able to be there talking about it as Australia are about to win. Yeah, it's incredibly emotional.
And now the next World Cup in 11 months' time, in their home background, will be the pressure, or now it will be a habit? Yalla, they won one World Cup, let the cabinet flow with trophies.
Well, the advantage of playing at home in Australia, they know the conditions. Australia knows the conditions incredibly well. But the thing that's more chance now is because they've found the template that really works. And Australia, since 2007, have never found that template. Got really close a couple of times, but now they know exactly what works and what's going to beat some amazing T20 sides. Like England and Pakistan in particular, through this tournament, were outrageously good. And India, an outrageous team as well. They just got unlucky, 2 tosses. Pakistan and New Zealand, they got on the wrong side, and then it's too far gone, unfortunately. But India, because of the depth of talent that India's got, they've got so many world-class players that they're going to come into Australia not fearing the conditions at all, because a lot of those guys have had success in Australia before. So it's going to be, if things fall their way like they did for Australia to win the toss last night, to be able to win the toss against Pakistan, these little moments, which something so simple as a toss of the coin, can make such a big difference.
But tosses in Australia will matter because in Australia the wickets are true and you can play your shots, right?
Not as, I wouldn't think that there'll be as strong a bias to the sides batting second, especially in Dubai, as it was. I've never really seen that before. I've never seen that before. Like 12 games will end up being 13 games, 12 times the team batting second won, which is just, it's pretty outrageous because the wicket, on early games, yes, the wicket changed. Definitely, it changed enough and the dew, but also the wicket was more so damp, too damp. But towards the back end of the tournament, it's bizarre. So Australia is not that way to that extent. The wickets are true. There's no, at that time of the year, October, there'll be no dew. So the toss is not going to have as big a say, which is great for, everyone. Well, unless you're on the wrong side of it. If you're on the right side of the tosses, then it's great. But if you're not, then it's not fair.
Well, Finch did the best thing. He might have not scored runs, but won all the tosses.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it wasn't Finch. Finch at the moment's not at his best. You can see him really chasing, trying to find his game again. He's moving around a lot more than he ever did. Beforehand, he'd just stand still and just smack it because he can hit it anywhere. But now he's batting out of his crease. He's charging, which he never used. Well, when he's at his best, he never did. So he's, still really trying to re-find his T20 game again. But, he did something really good for Australia. His tosses, he just kept winning them at the right times and everyone else was able to capitalise on it.
Well, people remember Alan Border, who won the first World Cup in '87. People will remember Finch to win the first T20 title.
That's it, absolutely. Never take that away from Aaron Finch. The ability to be able to bring that together, bring the team together from a leadership perspective alone, with the things that had been going on in and around the team. There'd been a lot talked about and issues going on internally within the team that were publicised during the winter around Justin Langer, and that he might have lost the team, and there's a bit of infighting and that sort of thing. So for Justin Langer and Aaron Finch as a starting point to be able to just bring it all together shows a testament of people willing to be able to just work through situations, work through times that aren't great, and find a way through it. And that's why I was so stoked for Justin Langer as well, because he genuinely cares about his players. He genuinely cares about Australian cricket. It's not just fabricated. It's run so deep in him, as it did when he was a player. So for him to be able to work through the situations that occurred during the winter and the things that sort of were going on shows a testament to his character, which you saw as a cricketer, and his evolution to be able to be so effective and such an incredible opening batsman in Test cricket, and then as a coach to evolve to a point where you're able to galvanise a group to be able to play some outrageous T20 cricket in the last couple of games in particular. It's pretty special.
You mentioned about Justin Langer. Shane Watson has any plans to take up coaching now that he's commentated this World Cup and he's played cricket at the highest level? So assessment of the game, understanding the game, you think taking it as a job in the future?
Look, I think that I absolutely love the privilege to be able to commentate, and I never fully understood how much. I never realised how much I'd enjoy it, but then I never fully understood the privilege it is to be able to try and, from my perspective, try and give some insights into what's going on in front of the viewer's eyes, because a lot of the commentators at times they didn't play T20 cricket, or not much of it. So to be able to try and give those insights and help people try and understand, the viewers at home, to be able to understand really what is going on. So again, I feel that's an absolute privilege, and I've loved it. So I'll definitely want to be able to do more and get better at continuing to convey that. But coaching was always one thing that I've always loved. I just love helping people. But how that fits into my life with my family and the commitment and that sort of thing, I'm not sure. But everything's open. But the commentating side of things, I've absolutely loved it. And I feel for the ICC and Star Sports to be able to take the risk on me, and I hadn't commentated properly at a ground before. I'd done some remote commentary for the Star dugout during the IPL, which was very different to sitting there with your co-commentator. It was a super cool experience, and just gave me more insights into exactly what goes on with the broadcast, the skills of these guys who've done it for so long. Seeing Ian Bishop for example, like everyone, but Ian Bishop, just preparation just is meticulous. That's the reason why he's so good at what he does. Like anything, if you want to get good at it, you got to spend the time. And Ian Bishop, for example, he's obviously been doing it for a long period of time, but every preparation is just to the T every single time. So it was very, very special to be able to see people at the height of their game in a different industry.
I wouldn't be surprised, people who see this show, there are 2 new franchises coming in IPL, will be behind Watto to take up a job of coaching, because the way you have analyzed this World Cup and you were spot on in your judgment, and you read the game so well, and that's why you've been a legend. Watto, it's been a pleasure to have you. Before we sign up, one thing about the Ashes which is coming up, how do you see that going?
It's going to be a bit different now that Ben Stokes is coming, which is a great thing, because if Ben Stokes and Jofra Archer didn't come in particular, then England's firepower was lacking in a big way. Unfortunately, Jofra Archer's got it's not a good for a fast bowler, an extreme fast bowler, to have the elbow injury that he's got. That's not a good sign for someone who's so incredibly gifted. But the great news that Ben Stokes has recovered from physical and mental things that he's been dealing with is an incredible. It really gives that Ashes series even more excitement around it. I still feel that Australia are going to be too strong, just because of the depth of Australia's just their team in general and the quality of their players. England are still really finding their feet with these new sort of players coming in. Ben Stokes is definitely is a huge addition to their team, but it's always so hard to win away from, in the Ashes in particular, it's always so hard to win away from home, and it's really pretty rare that happens. And I don't think things are really going to change that much in that regard, because I think Australia, that is going to be very dominant in their home conditions. Unless Ben Stokes comes in and as an all-rounder has a similar performance as he had in the last Ashes series at home, or a Freddie Flintoff sort of Ashes series where they just dominate with bat and ball. If he does something like that, then of course, and he's got the potential to do that because he's so good, then things might be different, but he's going to have to do that. I think something superhuman.
For the Ashes?
I think it's going to be 3-1.
You still give them one game, huh?
I'm being nice.
That's brilliant. Brilliant. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, here we had Watto talking about Australia's great ramp in the T20 World Cup. He mentioned about he would be interested in coaching. He loved his commentating job. And he also mentioned 3-1 for Australia in the Ashes. Thank you very much, Watto. Pleasure to have you. You know what you mentioned about Star Sports. This is a small platform. What would you like to say about working with me?
Oh, it's been so much fun. And your deep understanding of the game, Anis, is, I've met too many people, honestly, in and around cricket who've got such a deep knowledge of the game. Deep knowledge, but then obviously I've met people who've got the passion for the game, but not the deep understanding of exactly what's going on. So for me, this is like, I grew up with my dad who just knew cricket inside out. So it's just like sitting here having a chat to one of your mates who knows cricket and has got the passion and love of the game like I do. So I've had an absolute ball. It's been brilliant to be able to talk through, lead up to the games, post games, and hopefully people out there who've watched this have got, well, they'll get a lot out of it because of what you do anyway, but us talking about the game and how things are panning out, hopefully, I'm sure people got a bit out of it, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to doing it a lot more with you in the future.
Thank you so much for your kind words, and we look forward to having you many more times, maybe during the Ashes if we have time, but it was great to have you, Watto.